Growing up, I drank the Kool-Aid of my parents' and community's beliefs. I made that belief system more important than my own needs and happiness. Looking back, I can't fault anyone for that, not even quote-unquote God. I now have clarity in decisions and choices I make. I'm fully engaged in finding joy in my life, in my own way, without the influence and construct of others. This is an uplifting discussion from there to now.
Hey, everyone. So I'm really excited about this podcast. We've had this scheduled for several weeks because I really wanted these two to be here, Dannielle Larkin and Shirlayne Quayle. Thank you. And Shirlayne came down from Salt Lake City just for me. Just kidding. She actually had some other appointments to be at.
Hey, this was first on the list, though.
Oh, thank you. So I did a Mean Girls episode with my 20-year-old niece and some of her track mates at Utah Tech. And we just talked about, and I'm referring to Mean Girls as in that movie, how girls are mean to each other and they're mean-spirited, they're jealous, they do backstabbing things. And there's a lot of really underlying unconscious behavior that happens as well, and competing for men's attention and stuff like that. And so we were talking about what is that like as a 20-year-old and are they experiencing it? And then, of course, I'm speaking with my friends in our 40s and 50s of we're still experiencing it. And why is this still happening? You think we're advancing.
Yeah.
In our age, our behaviors advance, and it doesn't. Unfortunately, women seem to get stuck in these patterns and programs, and I think a lot of them aren't even fully aware that they're behaving the way that they are, and it feels like a program. It's very cookie cutter ish.
It's like high school doesn't end; it just keeps cycling back in different scenarios and situations.
Yeah. You know, even just the words mean girls, it's kind of hard for me. I don't like that because it's basically this way of being dismissive of women and not really understanding, like, why is that even happening? You know, because even us saying, oh, you know, they're mean girls. I hate that we do that as humans to each other, that we make these dismissive titles. And then it's just an easy way to not understand the behavior. Mm-hmm. So I was telling you guys before we started, I was reading some articles that were kind of in reference to the LDS Church and some of the backstory of like women, the pressures that have been put on women in all religious spaces. And really, it's not even just religious spaces all throughout the world for women to fit into a certain box or fill a certain role. And just this last week, you know, one of the LDS female leaders was talking about how she kind of made it sound like it was just easy, you know, like, yeah, I worked and I was a stay-at-home mom and I kind of did it all and it was all so great. And I love that for her. I hope that's her true story, that it was easy for her. But then people started talking about, well, that's not the full story. Like, what about all the shame that was placed on women in the 70s and 80s in and by some of these religious organizations when women were saying, I need my education, I need to go work, here's what my desires are. And there was this strong amount of pressure put on them to not do that. And in fact, there were a bunch of quotes from LDS prophets saying, women, go home, you know, have your joy be in, my favorite one was said, like, making your husband's bed and having a meal ready for him and having a smile on your face. And, you know, it was all these kinds of things that, you know, basically made women feel a lot of shame. Mm-hmm. And I think that when that type of thing happens, when you're young, is you go, oh, we were talking about also, I wanted to be an attorney. You wanted to be an attorney, yeah. Heather. Shirlayne, what was your dream?
My dream originally was to be a doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I changed that dream because I thought, well, I don't want to have to take time away from my own family to deliver someone else's baby. And I couldn't see how those could reconcile as an 18 or 19-year-old, having grown up in Utah, even though I didn't grow up LDS specifically.
Right.
And so still those cultural influences, you know, of you have to choose.
Right.
So I still felt like I had to choose in that regard.
And yeah, even in looking outside of just the LDS community, I think any type of religious community, any church state type of programming, which we are in the United States of America, where it's heavily patriarchal in its approach. It's very men forward in the way that men are put as an authoritative over women and stuff. And then we're also seeing too that women are being suppressed in a lot of ways and not allowed to really fully express themselves and fully step into who they are. And we're really taught to be more of a subservient type of behavior to everyone around us and to put ourselves last. And is that where all this anger, resentment comes from, where we're all mean to each other?
Well, we can't even make our own healthcare decisions right now,
Right.
with our doctor. And so, yeah, those pressures are real. And to Danielle's point, having a little bit of empathy for each other, and really starting to realize that we don't know everyone's story.
And being real.
Yeah, being real. And, we don't know what people have gone through. We don't know we just don't know what's going on with them either in the past or in the moment. And if we can't meet with that empathy and just see people as humans, because none of us are perfect, then I think a lot of people get stressed out and their default is, I need to make myself feel better. And one of the ways I can do that is by stomping on other people, whatever that looks like, whether it's intentional or not.
Why are women doing it more predominantly with women? Because they seem to be more competitive.
I think it's more culturally acceptable. That might be one reason.
I think that part of that, cultural thing that we're exploring, like what happened culturally and why were women like told not to be just, little boy, be what you want to be, little girl, you're going to be this. And I think there's tons of pressures on little boys too. I mean, that could be a whole nother episode.
Yeah.
So just societal pressure, period, that you need to be a certain thing, that pushes forward into our adult lives. And if we're all supposed to fit in the same box, the box ain't big enough, And so then this concept of there's this really small pie and there's only a few slices and we got to step on each other to get to the top so we can have part of that. And this idea that, we'll have like the token woman in the boardroom. Well, then who gets to be that token woman in the boardroom, or should the boardroom really just be full of a diversity of people who have a diversity of thought, regardless of what they look like or who they are? Who are they as a person and how do they contribute to this boardroom? Like, and that's our
their intellect
ultimate
and experience.
Right. That's our nirvana, right? It's like we get to the point where we just can say, okay, I'm picking these 12 people for my board, these 13 people for my board because they're the people who bring the diversity of thought that my business needs or that my, whatever you're forming, my nonprofit needs. But right now, we're still in a space, we're doing so much better. I have to say, don't you think from like our childhood, like I've thought so many times about my mom's generation and how limited many of the women were. But I mean, I was sharing earlier, and I think you guys, would want to share your stories too. But like when I was 8 years old, I remember thinking, okay, so I want to be an attorney really bad. But what I'm hearing is I'm supposed to be a mom and a wife, and that's all I'm supposed to care about. But I'm not feeling like that's all I want. So then I kind of conceptualized like, okay, so the best thing for me to do is never to get married and never to have kids, because then I can go to law school. And I couldn't ever see the two things happening at the same time because everybody was telling me that they couldn't.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's getting a lot better. I mean, I think that for one thing, our generation has said, we grew up, I was born in 1970. I mean, I grew up with that whole women's movement and it was happening and I didn't know it. So I think we get to benefit a lot from a lot of the conversations, whether they were positive or negative or however they were received in the past. Our generation benefits a lot from that. And I think that we've been able to pass that on and change a lot of things in the process. I also think that we had maybe because of that, this idea that we could be super women and that we did get to do it all and we could have it all and we could have it all on our terms. And I hear a lot of women saying exactly that. Well, I can, I do, I do all these things. And I'm glad for them. Like you said, that's awesome. I think that most of the women I know, really, when you get down to it, we've all made sacrifices. We've all had to choose one or the other. And we don't regret those choices necessarily. I certainly don't regret my choices. I decided to become a mom way later in life because I wanted to have my career and I was married and we had a great life. And then I'm like, hang on just a minute. I'm not going to be complete as a human, I don't feel like, if I don't get to experience motherhood. And that was maybe selfish or whatever, if you want to look at it from a professional standpoint, but that was one of the things that I had to do to stay true to me. And I think that when we come out of alignment with what is true for us, when, going back to the why, it's a lot easier to be stressed out and worried about different things, and then just to snap at people or to take those emotions out on other people. And sometimes that means being, quote, a mean girl or being perceived as a mean girl. And perception is another thing. A lot of times it's not intentional,
Right.
but it's perceived that way. I mean, think about how much pressure high school and college girls are under for all these things we're talking about and all the things they're expected to do and be and blah, 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 blah.
And then body image on top of that.
Exactly. All of those issues. And so it's understandable why they get stressed out and then why it might come across as, mean girl. I'm not quite exactly sure why we aren't progressing more, or like it's not an accelerated progression though between like high school and now in terms of still how women oftentimes treat each other. I think it gets better in a lot of ways, but we do still, experience it.
Yes. And what are you experiencing? I get side-eyed sometimes by women, and I'm like, why are you looking at me like that? Like, why do you have to be so like mean and be like, what is she wearing kind of look? And why can't you be like, oh, that's a cute outfit. You look really unique and different. I don't know. But why are we doing that to each other?
Yeah, I think that those kind of behaviors like have to be analyzed, on a case-by-case basis. But I do think that the majority of those types of behaviors always reflect back on the person. They're mirroring their own fears. They're mirroring their own anxieties.
Insecurities.
Their own insecurities. They're basically telling you, like, I have some fear that is making me behave like this. And so you guys know Eckhart Tolle. Mm-hmm. He's
such a great writer.
Oh my gosh, he's my favorite. And I've been reading him a lot lately because this last year was challenging with the election because, I've done 2 elections now, and both of them I really had to like put on my big girl panties. You know what I mean? I really had to put on my armor and just say, okay, do I want to do this for my community? Like, are my reasons for doing this, are they good? Because if they're not good, I shouldn't do it at all because I'm going to be in the line of fire. And, there are going to be people who misrepresent my character, who misjudge me, who say things, basically defamation. There was a lot of defamation. There was a lot of, just
it was extremely mean-spirited.
Yeah, just mean stuff.
Really for no really reason besides being mean.
Yeah. But I guess that's really not true because there is a reason. So there's something in it for them. There's something that is motivating a person when they're being mean to you. And so it's like figuring out what's that motivation and how do we get in front of that and how do we help each other as women or just as humans? How do we help each other? How do we, grab their hand? And I mean, sometimes I joke, I want to say, who hurt you? Like what happened to you? Mm-hmm. But I don't want to be dismissive.
Do you hate yourself?
Right. I don't want to be dismissive, so I would never really say that to someone because it would sound dismissive to them. But my point is I really do want to take their hand and say, like, I don't understand your behavior right now. Like, what is happening inside of you? Because the way you're speaking to me or the way you're representing yourself or the aggression you're showing towards me, I honestly don't deserve that.
Right.
And you were asking earlier, like, how do we stand up for ourselves? And I feel like...
Or how do we stop it or counteract it and not reciprocate it? Because when you act the same way back to them, you just keep that cycle going. And how do we break that cycle?
Yeah. I think you have to stand in your own power and know that that is not how I'm going to act, and I am going to address the situation with grace. And that's what you did, Dannielle, all throughout. And I've been in that position. I've had to do that. And I've learned a lot from deciding that was the way I was going to handle it because that was true for me. Mm-hmm. It wasn't right for me. I wouldn't have felt like myself to push back or be mean back, right? I'm not a mean person when I'm aligned with what's good for me. And so I think that a lot of it is, being willing to be self-reflective and being willing to consider what might be going on and look at the situation beyond yourself and even beyond the person who's, treating you the way they are or whatever. But I would like to say that it's not always about being mean, though. I mean, one of the things that I've been loving about being in Salt Lake, and that is a kind of a continuation of the energy and what's building here, is there are more women who support and lift each other than there are women who are mean. And
Do you find that more in northern Utah than in southern Utah?
No,
Or
I
just in
find it
general?
as a continuum. Yeah, I think that the group of women, like it was women that kept me here. It was women back 12 years ago, 13 years ago when I moved to St. George and southern Utah. That even though I felt like I landed on another planet culturally, just coming from Salt Lake, I was like, but the women that I met were amazing, and they were the core and the people that kept me here. They were also, some of them, the meanest people throughout the entire time I was here, And so it's this dichotomy, but the percentage was, mean to positive to supportive to lifting, way, way low percentage on the mean side. And interestingly enough, going back to the empathy thing, one of the women who was the absolute meanest to me when I first started working in St. George, viciously mean, right? And undercutting and trying to get me fired and all this stuff and telling lies. Like, it was very interesting. I ran into her in the grocery store like 5 years after I left that job. And she came up to me and she said, Shirlayne. And I said, yes. And she was like, do you remember me? And I'm like, yes, I remember you. And she said, I want to apologize to you. I treated you so horribly and you did not deserve it. I was going through a horrible, horrible time in my life. I felt completely hopeless and I completely took it out on you, and I hope you can forgive me. And I was just like, oh my gosh, you are amazing. Because this was the person that she really is, right? It wasn't the person who was being mean.
Yeah.
And I said, can I give you a hug? And she was like, really? You'd like to hug me? And so it was just this reconciliation, and it was so special and touching.
That's such beautiful closure.
Yeah, so it helped me realize that when she was being mean to me, that really wasn't who she is either. Some people, maybe it's who they are, but that's not who she was. And I knew it wasn't who she was because I knew she didn't treat everybody that way. She had this amazingly beautiful, loving, kind side of her. It just wasn't ever, like, the opposite was directed to me. And so, but I could have treated her completely different. I could have been a complete jerk right back to her. And I just chose not to do that, because why would I add more energy?
Yeah,
Negative energy to the world, right? Like, why would I do that consciously and intentionally? That to me doesn't feel right.
Yeah, and I really loved how, Dannielle, you totally handled your whole situation too, because I saw you behind the scenes and literally you were just unresponsive. Just do not reciprocate.
So
like, that does not exist. And that is seriously the most powerful reaction you can ever give, is no reaction at all, because it takes that power away from them, because they have no power over you until you react and respond, right? And energy, when you take energy to its most minutest form, you can't destroy energy, but you can convert it and change it, right? So someone that directs it. Yeah, someone who directs this energy to you, you can be like, deflect, or you can literally say, I'm changing this into really beautiful light and love. And sometimes I envision like beautiful rose quartz or like a amethyst color, and I'm like, bathe it in light and love. Back at you. Love you.
It's a great visual.
Sometimes I visualize like glitter sparkling down on them.
Love it. Yeah, I had to set my intention, and that was my intention, and I worked on that with my family and my friends, and I really appreciated all the feedback, because I just said, if I'm going to do this, I have to do it according to my core values, and I have to maintain my integrity. And I have to remember, like, my why. So every time something really ugly would get thrown at me, I would review my why. Darren and I would sit there at night and I'd say, okay, this really awful thing happened today. And he'd say, okay, so why are you running? What's your intention? What is your goal for our community? And I had asked him to do that with me, and he's such a great supporter and partner, and he's kind of a Zen master, I always call him, because he's very good at staying calm and staying on, keeping his purpose pure. And so I couldn't have made it through. Like, you look at politics locally,
so
statewide.
hard.
I mean, the governor was booed at his own, convention. I don't care who you are. Like, you don't boo your governor.
Yeah.
You show respect. You can 100% disagree with him. You can, have vigorous debate, but there needs to be a level of respecting each other's humanity. When we get rid of that, we have a problem, because we don't see each other as human. And I know Shirlayne's experienced this. We probably all have, but she and I have had a lot of conversations about this, when people turn kind of nasty towards you, there's something that clicks sometimes in their head where they literally don't see you as human. And sometimes you look into their eyes and you can see that they don't see you as human. They see you as this impediment to their, like somehow you're getting in the way of their joy and happiness, and you need to be eliminated so that they can get back to life. And it's this very strange conversion that happens. Sometimes you see it when people are riding bikes and somebody else is in a car. And when you're on the bike and somebody else is in the car and they're driving aggressive and they swerve towards you, you're thinking, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, like I have a family. And then you switch places and somebody else is on the bike and you're in the car and you're all of a sudden like, I'm in a hurry, get out of my way. And when we see how our brains can switch back and forth like that, we realize that it's really easy to dehumanize people. And I think, with our particular topic today is just, women, are women lifting women, or women helping women, or are we being impediments to each other? Yeah. To me, it just comes down to like, how do we see each other? Mm-hmm. Do we see each other as sisters? Do we see each other as friends? Do we see each other as humans who are coexisting together and we're all trying to do our best? We're all trying to, everybody wants love. Everybody wants acceptance. Everybody wants friendship. Everybody wants safety. We have these basic core human needs. And when we forget that, when I have somebody call me for city council and say, oh, these disgusting homeless people, like that right there, it breaks my heart. I get it. Maybe you felt frustrated because somebody who is unhoused was in a space and you didn't feel safe. And so then your reaction is to dehumanize them. Mm-hmm. You forget that this is a person with a mom and a dad just like you, and who has hopes and dreams. And, breaking it down like that helps us to see each other. And I think when it comes to women supporting women, we talk a lot about patriarchy and the hold that patriarchy has. In my brain, I think of patriarchy being propped up by a bunch of women.
It's true. Women are supporting the patriarchy movement by behaving the way that they are.
Yeah.
And it just baffles me because they don't really are able to see it.
Right.
And they're in this struggle to work up this ladder, whatever proverbial ladder it is in their life. Yet they're like kicking off the women away from them, yet trying to succeed in a man's world. And what we really need to be doing is literally all holding hands and working up that ladder together and supporting each other. And I feel like the way that we treat each other and the way that women have just been debased and demoralized, and you see how women are treated in pornography too, and all of these things, I feel like it just really mirrors and mimics how we're treating Mother Earth also. So it's just like this feminine thread where there's this unkindness towards women just in general. And then we're all so unkind to each other sometimes too. And it just really makes me sad that we are doing that. And I just keep on thinking back to this visual. When I was a new mom, we bought a house and I was so excited to make curtains. And I had several friends over. And this was when I was a practicing member of the LDS Church, Mormonism. And some women came over and they looked at my curtains and they literally went like this. Looked back behind it to see if I had lined it, if it was lining. And I was like, are you kidding me? And then they were bragging about how they were preparing their kids' lunches and in comparison, all of this comparison. And I'm like, why are we doing this? This is ridiculous. As if it's not already hard enough to be a young mom, right? And to be trying to just take care of little kids. Why are we competing in this manner too? It's just all these little weird underlying things that just baffle me and make me kind of laugh in hindsight.
I think I know why we're doing it. We're doing it because we were trained to do it. We do what we know. My mom has shared, my mom's really smart. She's really smart. She's super talented. And she had people in her life when she was young who really, would say like they would comment on her weight and like that she was beautiful, but there was like you're beautiful, but. And it just broke her. And it was like this statement of your only goal in life is to get a man. And instead of highlighting, she's incredible, like highlight all the incredible things about her. And it was painful for her. And she shared that over the years, like the struggles that caused for her internally from a young age and feeling like her worth was completely tied up. And I mean, think about it. It's the best tool ever. If you want to keep the powerful women of the world in check, pit them against each other. Mm-hmm. You know, pit them against each other. I believe men are powerful. I believe women are powerful. I believe the combination of our power is what makes the world beautiful. But get that out of balance. You know, make sure that the power of the women is that they're, you know, is taken away because they are stepping on each other, and you mess up the whole balance of the universe.
Yeah, absolutely. We are so powerful. And I actually think we're more powerful than men because we have our womb and we actually have the power of literal creation. And then that womb also allows us to be an extremely creative beings as well. And so we can blossom into that more. But I think that really comes with support. We supporting each other, loving each other, being kind and compassionate to each other, and literally deflecting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, you know, going back to the power balance. I mean, we see this all over the world. You know, you mentioned kind of globally in the beginning. And when we look at like entrepreneurship and micro enterprise and stuff, there's all kinds of research and proof that if you invest in women in, let's say, a small village in Africa, they do better, their kids do better, the village does better. Like, it doesn't take a lot of money, but the women are the ones who are driven, the women who are the ones who are running, you know, doing all this stuff. The men might be going to work or they might not, depending on the cultural aspect of what's going on in that particular place. But investing in women is the constant. And so that investment piece, I think, is an important component in how we're considering. Like, we all love to mentor. You know, we have lots and lots of female friends. Those are investments. They're investments in lifting those around us and those we care about. They're also investments in ourselves. Because to your point, Dannielle, like, you had to have a team and a safety net around you in that election. You didn't expect yourself to do it on your own. You handled most of it on your own, just, you know, emotionally, because you were the target of it. None of us actually know how that felt for you, but you knew enough to not go it alone. And I think that is an interesting piece too, because a lot of times when women or girls are mean to other women and girls, it's maybe one or two or three kind of, you know, there's this small clique that have decided to band together, and there's often a leader, you know, I mean, going back to the movie, and we experience those things as girls, I think, and women all through, like, especially as girls. I mean, I experienced it all the time, you know, in high school and growing up and stuff. And it's how we decide to deal with that. Like, do we have the tools and the resources, and have we cultivated those either unintentionally or intentionally throughout especially our childhood, and have those people around us, especially our female role models? You know, how many of us had strong moms, strong grandmothers, strong aunts, like people around us, that friends, parents that yeah, we had strong dads because it was the 70s and 80s, but did we have strong women? Hell yeah, we did. And so that helped shape us in different ways too. And I think, you know, those clicky moments are those three that need, let's say there are three mean girls, they need each other to feel value, because they're not finding the value in themselves, as you said earlier. And so I think that those pieces too are interesting to watch the patterns. Like, I don't know all the why, but there are definitely patterns that can be analyzed. I'm just getting ready to read an amazing book that Jamie Shaw recommended to me a while ago called Invisible Women. And it's all about how data and research and science and stuff completely leaves out women. And I've known this for a while, and I've listened to the podcast, and so I'm super excited to dig into the book. But that's part of the why. Like, we do, you know, Dannielle mentioned earlier, and you mentioned earlier, we've been like left out of things. Like, we don't even know information about menopause. Medical providers are not even trained on how to deal with menopause, but half of the population will go through it at some point in their life. Like, for sure. It's not an if or a maybe, you know? And so, like, there are really, beyond Utah culture or whatever, there are just major issues in the history of our world.
At least 2,000 years.
Have led to where we are today, right? And
2,000 years.
so I think that like being a part of changing that history by not being a mean girl and trying specifically to lift people up, or, you know, especially linking arms with our
taking
women.
a bolder way forward, Shirlayne.
Exactly.
Hey,
Thank you.
What you're saying really reminds me and makes me think of investing in women.
Yep.
And
It's so
something
important.
that I've heard from women some women who I have contact with, on a regular basis is, why would we invest in women? That's taking away from white women don't need special investment. That concept of, if we invest in women, if we invest in, say, the disability community, people who are physically disabled and they need special accommodations, if we invest in them, we're taking something away from other people. Yeah. Wrong.
Scarcity mentality will never get us anywhere.
Exactly.
No, that scarcity mentality terrifies me, because it is basically, it really is that there's just this one pie, and we're all just stomping on each other to get what we can, to grab and take what we can take, as opposed to, oh, I see a need. There's plenty of needs that men have when they say, I have this need. I need to form this, I would really like to form a group of male supporters who specifically understand this thing that would be very male that I'm going through. That's beautiful. Like, why? That doesn't take anything away from me as a woman. When we say I'm investing, when we have, people like Dr. Susan Madsen, and she's showing you actual data from years and years and years. She's done a massive amount of work to collect all of this data to say women and girls have been left behind in all of these areas. They haven't been invited to the table in all these areas. We need to invest in them, because investing in them means we invest in all of us and we all rise together. And then she catches a lot of flack for that. Like, oh, how dare you? By saying that, you are demeaning men. You're claiming men are stomping on women. No, that is not true. What we're saying is, we see a need, proving why it happened or isn't really the important part. The important part is, how do we fix it? How do we change trajectory when we know someone's being harmed, or we know they need help, and we know we have the tools to help them? Yeah. We have the data. We have the investment in our communities. I mean, Utah is a fantastic place this way. Utah is really proactive. Like, oh, we see a problem, let's fix it. We're not ones to sit back and wait. Right. And so Shirlayne is a big part of A Bolder Way Forward.
I'm glad you brought it up, because I had this really interesting conversation a week and a half ago or so, 2 weeks ago, with a woman who's running for political office. And I don't know her well. I have a lot of respect for her because of the things that I see her doing in the community that are really beautiful. We have very, very different political views. I'm 99% sure. And she, we were talking about A Bolder Way Forward. And she said, I really have a hard time, and this is part of the flack that Dr. Madsen gets, because it seems like it's just like women are, horrible and women suck. And it's always this woe is me, and all the data is so negative about women. And I don't believe that at all. And that hasn't been my experience. That was the comment. And I said, I'm so glad it hasn't been your experience. Utah is the number one state for domestic violence and sexual abuse in the nation.
That's wild.
Number one.
Like, that is not okay. Like, can we agree that that's not okay? Yes, we can agree that that's not okay. It's like, okay, that is not a political issue. That is not a gender issue. That is not but women are more likely to be the victims in those situations, and we have the highest rates in the country. What does that say about the way that our society is managing this, or whatever?
And what messages are we sending?
Yeah, and why are we not doing anything about it? Right. So now we are trying to. I mean, there's a lot of work, and has been a lot of work going along in that space. But it's really interesting, because the thing I took away from that was, I haven't had that experience, so I don't believe it's real. And it's like, one of the things that Dr. Madsen and all of our spoke leaders and stuff we talk about often is, there's all this data there. How do you get people to, number one, pay attention to it, and number two, understand that it actually is showing that this exists? Whether you've experienced it or not. It's awesome if you haven't, but it does exist. Like, the data shows it exists. And that's just the data that's been collected. What about all that data we talked about earlier, that hasn't been collected, that we don't even know about yet? Right. So it's a really interesting it's an interesting space to be in, to be talking about gender equity, especially right now.
I think what Shirlayne just said, Heather, answers one of your questions earlier. Like, what do we do about it when she listens and then she responds with empathy? Like, I'm so glad that wasn't your experience. Let me share with you data about who has had this experience so you can understand the experience of another. Like, that is one way for us to help. we can't be guaranteed we can stop someone from thinking something, but we can show empathy, we can listen, and then we can share our own experiences and data that can help them to maybe see someone else's point of view if they choose to do so, right? I mean, I had the exact same experience as Shirlayne. Like, the city of St. George won this great award for like elevating women. And then one of the women who was at the meeting when we received that award said, this is BS, this is bogus. Like, women in Utah are not discriminated against. They're not. They never
Fascinating.
are. And my thought was, I love that that's your experience, that you don't feel like you've ever experienced, any sort of discrimination. I hope every woman at some point in Utah and every man can say that. I hope every resident of our state at some point can say, I don't feel discriminated against. I feel very welcome in my community. I feel like I get to take part just because of who I am. I just get to be me. I just get to show up. Right. And there's not these expectations of I have to fit into a certain box. I just get to be me. And I mean, so having that empathy and saying, oh, wow, I'm really glad that was your experience. I hope more people get to participate in a beautiful experience like yours.
Yeah. And it was like, I walked away from it feeling great. Like I still have just as much respect for this person and all of the things that they're, that they do care about, that we agree on or whatever. And I have respect for their own views too. Like, they get to have their own opinions, but I appreciated that conversation. I appreciated that she was willing to bring up her perspective and have a conversation about it, and I don't know if it changed anything in her mind or not. That doesn't matter. Like, it's not my place to decide if that's good or bad, but we had the conversation. And I think those are important moments as well, when we actually
see each other, when each other.
Yeah. When you're in a place where you can engage, sometimes you just can't engage. Like, you have to just be like, no, I'm not engaging in this. But in this case, it was like, no, here's an opportunity. You asked me a question and I could have given you the answer you probably would like to hear, but I'm going to give you the answer that I feel is true and accurate and, based on at least what I know about the data. And if you have more information, great. Let's continue that, because that's going to make it stronger and make it better. But those civil conversations have to be able to happen. And I think it was, for me, it was just a really cool experience, to get to have that discussion. And it was a celebratory event, and nobody was going to get into a big fight anyway. So that also helped. The setting was nice to be able to just have a conversation and not,
Yeah, I got to have a really fun conversation with Lisa Sandberg today, just about organic produce. And we had very differing opinions about it, but it was really great. We're like, well, I think this. And I'm like, I think that. And she's like, but I think this and this and that. I'm like, oh yeah, that's very interesting. So this is my thought. And it was just such a fun banter, but yet no one walked away feeling had hurt feelings or feeling butthurt about anything particularly. But it was just, we had this, you're confident, I'm confident, you're intelligent, I'm intelligent. We can have this really interesting conversation between each other and then walk away and be like, oh, isn't it such a nice day today?
Yeah. Heather, that brings up to me one of the biggest things that we can do for our daughters and for our sons and for the whole future generations going forward. Our kids have to learn critical thinking and consent.
Yeah.
Like, those are the two core things that if they carry those with them throughout their life, if they fully understand consent, and if they fully understand how to engage in critical thinking, which means you can sit and listen to someone say something that you completely disagree with. You don't have to correct them. You don't have to jump down their throat. You don't have to feel threatened.
Right.
You can critically think, okay, well, what do I believe? And is something that they say resonating with me? And am I willing to change my mind? Mm-hmm. Am I willing to receive data that I could process and then possibly change my perspective? And for me, going forward, if we want this whole concept of people being unkind to other people to stop, people have to stop feeling threatened by other people, which means you have to be able to critical think.
Oh my gosh, critical thinking is seriously a lost art, and it drives me crazy. I mean, that's why I did this podcast on conspiracy theories, because I'm like, hey, let's employ some critical thinking skills here. We get barraged by so much information, and let's actually think about it. Why are we just keeping ourselves in a box in this lane like this, and we're not actually opening up and going, oh, there could be other possibilities. Yeah. There could actually be other facts out there and stuff. So what I think I have come to the conclusion on the summary of our conversation is to always be kind and to smile and make eye contact. Also, when you see a woman walking down the street or in a coffee shop or anywhere and she looks fabulous, tell her. Right?
Everybody likes a compliment.
I know. Why are we holding back? We need to be celebrating each other. What other things can we do to celebrate each other?
I love to compliment. This is just my personal opinion, because for me growing up, everything was about phenotype. Mm-hmm. Everything was visual. Everything was like, you're a good girl if you look pretty. Mm. And so for just this is just my personal motto, but I still compliment on your fabulous blouse, right? But I really, for me, I feel like I'm extending love to my friends and family and neighbors when I can compliment them or engage with them on something that is who they are. Like I love Heather, that you are so smiley and positive. The first time I met Heather, I saw her at a mentor program at the Chamber of Commerce, and I was like, "Oh, that girl's radiating light. I'm going to go sit by her."
I know, I was sitting in the far corner too. I tried to be by myself, and Dannielle's like, "Oh, hi, can I sit by you?"
Yep. Not today.
She's like, "Didn't my body language sitting in the corner tell you I wanted to be alone?"
Dannielle's like,
"I'm so glad you did. Seriously, it was the best friendship that formed from that day on."
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that to add to your bullet points, your summary, empathy is huge. And for me, empathy is one of the easiest things for me to call upon. Sometimes I don't want to be kind. Sometimes I don't want to, whatever. I just don't want to deal with it. I don't want to critically think about the situation. I don't have the mental energy or whatever. But if I can just remember, hey, I don't know. Like I have to step back for a minute and just have that moment of saying, I don't know what's going on with them. And how do I want to be known in this situation? How will I feel at the end of the day by the way I act in this situation? Mm-hmm. And if I look back on it and say, I did not handle that as gracefully as I wish I would have, what can I do differently next time, or be a little bit better prepared, or why did that happen? Then that reflection is really important. That empathy piece, like we have to have it for ourselves and we have to have it for others. And I think that's part of what's kind of gotten lost in our current, whether it's politics or business or whatever.
And respect.
Although I will say, business is doing a lot better of focusing on like gender equity and really paying attention to what's happening. I mean, it's good. It's good that people are having those conversations. It's sad. I think it's sad that DEI is now, you're not supposed to call things DEI or whatever.
What is DEI?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Oh, see, I work in a very non-traditional workplace, so I don't know what these words mean.
Well, the legislature just made some, changes to the way some organizations like state universities and stuff can approach or talk about or label DEI activities.
Which will be extremely silly because it's so necessary. We are diverse.
We are diverse.
By our very existence, we're diverse.
I hope we are.
If we have equity, everyone is in a better place.
Let us all be diverse.
Yeah.
Because it keeps things way more interesting.
Yeah.
Right. So, the need for them to still focus on, like, how do we all come together when we have these different ethnicities, these different cultures, all these things, but we are also so alike. Like, what are the things that bind us together? That will always be a focus of universities because their main goal is to teach critical thinking.
Yes.
So
that I feel like this circles right back to being your authentic self. And when you see a woman being authentic and being unique, why are we naysaying that? We should be celebrating that as well. We should be celebrating everyone's uniqueness and supporting each one in their all diverse opinions and thoughts and behavior and clothing and hairstyle. I mean, it's so refreshing when I see diversity. It makes me really happy and giddy, especially in Southern Utah.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say that's one of the things I'm loving about living in Salt Lake is I feel far less judged. I mean, even going to the grocery store. Yeah. Like people just wear whatever they want to wear, or you can tell like this person is definitely in a hurry and they're stressed out and they're not hiding it. They're not being rude or anything. They're just like, I'm in my world and I'm doing what I got to do. And I don't really have time to worry about what you think of me. And it's kind of refreshing. It wasn't like that 10 years ago, 12 years ago when I moved away, 12 years ago. but it's kind of grown up as an urban environment in that way, and especially from a diversity perspective. And so that, I think that Southern Utah is still, we're smaller. We're always a little bit more traditional here. It's changing so much though. And that push and pull, it's going to continue to happen. Like, it's not going to end. Suddenly people with diverse thought are not going to leave Southern Utah.
I hope not.
So
we've got to just help other people expand and grow also.
We will.
Yay.
We have the capacity. We'll do it.
We can do this.
And we're all in it together.
That's right.
Thanks, guys, for coming.
Thanks,
Thank
Heather.
you.
We love you.
I love you
That
too.
was super fun.
You are both my absolute favorites. And I hope
Thank
we
you
get-
for listening to the I Drank the Kool-Aid podcast. Join us next time. If you'd like to participate in this discussion, get a hold of us at idrankthekoolaidpodcast@gmail.com. Now let me ask you, what flavor of Kool-Aid are you drinking?
This has been a production from a podcast studio.